All right, we're back with Rock Forever. We've got a special guest. He is out on tour, making major noise with his new album, and going to tell you all about his history and what's happening. Please welcome MUTLU.
How's it going, man?
Doing great, man. Thanks for joining us. And is there a full name? Give us your full name.
My full name is MUTLU Honorall.
Okay.
But with a name like that, you don't really need anything but the first name.
That's for sure. You're the only MUTLU I know. So
yeah.
I will not get you confused with another one.
Right.
I always wondered why Yngwie J. Malmsteen needed the J. I don't
Yeah, you
know
probably
any
could have
other.
skipped that middle part there.
Yeah,
you know?
I don't know any other Yngwies, so it's crazy. I say less is more, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came up. I know there was a mention of touring with Joe Jackson and something with Hall & Oates, and just kind of bring us up to date, how you got started in music and where you grew up, and bring us to today.
Yeah, I got started in Philly. I've always been, born and raised here in Philly and still based here. And I just started playing around the scene, kind of playing open mics, and eventually kind of built like a little bit of like a local buzz and got things going here. And then the first real touring experience I had was touring with my good friend Amos Lee, and I still tour with him. I just opened a bunch of dates for him in the last month or so. So the first real touring I did was with him. And then the Joe Jackson tour came along, I guess around 2008. And I opened a whole 6-week run for Joe when he was touring behind the Rain album. And that was an awesome tour. I was always a fan of his from the Look Sharp record on, especially those first few records. So it was cool to do these shows with him. And for that tour, he had a little more of this like kind of classical setup. He had Graham Maybe and Dave Houghton, but he was playing like a grand piano. It was a kind of more jazzy classical interpretations of some of those earlier songs and some more recent ones. And then I met Daryl Hall and John Oates through T-Bone Walk, who produced my debut full-length album, which I did for Manhattan Records, which is part of Blue Note label group and EMI. I did an EP for them first, and then we did the full-length. T-Bone produced it, and he introduced me to Daryl. Daryl and I hit it off. He sang on the record, and that was right at the time that they were starting Live from Daryl's House. And I was one of the first guests on there. And it was amazing to see how that thing just took off, because I think something like 75 episodes in, they've had so many incredible artists, and just really cool to see how that show built up. But it was nice to see it from the very beginning, kind of how they got it going. And then right around that time, I started opening shows for Daryl and John. I'd say from 2010 to 2015, I opened a lot of dates for them, a lot of different cities across the country. Primarily Hall & Oates. Also opened some solo shows for Daryl and John as well. So, it's great getting to work with your heroes like, Daryl Hall, John Oates, and Joe Jackson. And of course, touring with Amos, who's a great artist. It's kind of like my musical brother. So that's kind of how I've gotten out there, beyond just Philly. And since then, I did the debut album, Live in It, and I've done a handful of EPs, and most recently the Good Trouble record.
When you approached the Good Trouble album, what was your thought in choosing a producer and the direction based on everything you had done before? What was your thought going in that you really wanted to achieve on this one?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. For this one, I sort of wanted to have an arc to it. I produced it with my friend Darius Amendolia, who did my last few records. He co-produced this one, and he produced the 2 EPs before that, Caffeine and Whiskey and the Hypnotize EP. So we had a really nice creative synergy. I wrote several of the tunes. We also co-wrote a few of the tunes together, he and I. And there was also one tune on the record that I co-wrote with John Oates, and he and Shane Terrio from the Hall & Oates band produced that track, and John also sang on it. So that actual song was a standalone that I'd recorded before the Good Trouble project, but when it came time to pull Good Trouble together, it really felt like it fit in. The kind of arc that I had for it was that the first part of the record, the first 3-4 tunes would be more social commentary, just discussing without being too heavy-handed, some of what's happening politically. A song like Lifeline, as well as Not Escapable and 9 to 5 to 5. Those were a little more in the social commentary. And the latter half was more personal kind of love songs, songs like Scarred, Oh My Girl, which is a closing track, and of course the song Nothing This Whole Wide World that I did with John. So I sort of had like a conceptual bent to it, and musically speaking, just trying to find grooves that really felt good. Like first and foremost for me, it's always about the songs. You know, do the songs hold up just voice and guitar? If I feel like that's the case, then it's about building the production layer by layer. And I think Darius and I we have a good musical chemistry. So from doing the previous few records, it really felt like we got into a zone with it.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. I know you've tasted a few flavors, so you kind of know what you're after, and
Yeah.
based on what's out there. Now, how has technology changed your process of either recording or performing or anything? Because I know there's always new gear and new toys, and I know things have radically changed, but a lot of people have their choice. What has it affected you?
Well, from the studio standpoint, I would say it's definitely had a big impact. I think initially when I started recording, my approach was more just putting live players in a room and trying to do it that way. Like my very first EP that I did, which was more just musicians in the room playing, which I still think there's a magic to that, but that can be costly and time consuming. So ever since living it, it's usually been more of I have someone that produces it with me or co-produces with me, and we sort of build the tracks up layer by layer. That's what we did with T-Bone on the Living It album, and he's, rest in peace. He was such an extraordinary musician and composer and arranger. We kind of were like a two-man band on that record, and we would a lot of times just two of us start the tracks, the guitar and a loop, and kind of build it up. And that's kind of the approach I've taken since then. I did also do the EP, the Dream Book EP with Rob Hyman from the Hooters, and he and Rick Chertoff produced that record. And we did a kind of a similar thing. Rob and I would sort of build up the tracks, and then we'd eventually bring musicians in to try to do overdubs and stuff. So that was a little more of a collaborative thing. But then with Darius, it's kind of been the same process. We build the tracks up together. We might have a few players come sit in, but I think technology has changed things, maybe sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worst. I do still think there's something special about when you put a group of players in a room and you capture that synergy, and you just basically putting that to tape rather than stacking everything. But from an economic standpoint, from the standpoint of mobility, where you can kind of record anywhere, I think that new technology definitely helps with kind of making them records the way I've been doing them.
Yeah, sometimes you got to do it that way, but like you say, in an ideal world, there's nothing that beats a live band in the same room, or jamming, gelling, vibing together.
Absolutely.
And that's certainly the beauty of at Daryl's place. It's seeing musicians in that element of performing live. Get rid of the computers and let's jam.
That's a great point. And that was Daryl's vision of it from the very beginning, was to capture that magic that's not too over rehearsed, when just players are learning tunes and putting them together, and how musicians collaborate with each other and feed off one another. That was always the spirit of that show. That was the vision he had, I think, from the very beginning. And I think that's what really made people connect to that show, is that just that sort of, there is a certain spontaneity of player just in the room. And again, if you can then take that sort of magic and put it on a record, there's really nothing better than that. Of course, sometimes you could take a live band that does really well in a live context, and it's not always easy to translate that to the studio, because it's a sterile environment. But I agree that magic at Daryl's house, I think that's the same magic that can happen in the studio if you just have a group of, say, 4 or 5 players who are just really dialed in.
Yeah, no doubt. And he was always famous for taking a fish out of water, in a sense, putting an artist in maybe the environment, or with some players that wasn't how they originally recorded their known songs. Right. So that spontaneity, like I say, is really magic. We live for it. Now, Absolutely. going out on tour, I know you leave on Sunday, and you'll be making your way out to the West Coast here, and doing the Hotel Cafe here in Hollywood and Bay Area and all that. Have you played in most parts of the U.S. and And what are some of the highlights for you as far as different parts of the country?
Yeah, I've played in pretty much every major city and a lot of the secondary markets too, between all the tours with Hall and Oates and Amos and Joe Jackson. So I've pretty much made it everywhere at one point in time. And a lot of times I've made it maybe a few times through. There have been certain markets that I've made it through more, that I've played more on my own. So Bay Area and LA, I've played once or twice on my own before, but I haven't necessarily been there as much on my own as I've been, say, Atlanta or, New York, or some of these other markets that I'm hitting. Like some markets I'm playing for the first time on my own, even though I've been there as a sport act, like Milwaukee, for example. So, but I mean, I love being out in California. I mean, just the LA vibe and the San Francisco vibe between those two. Once you make it to Cali, it's like those are kind of two cornerstones, I think, of any tour, especially if you're going to go out west. So I'm excited. They're challenging markets to build at the same time, but I'm excited to keep getting back out there more and more, and starting with this tour right here.
Yeah, I know, being a music fan and a musician yourself, you sense the history, in Southern California and the Bay Area, just knowing everything that's come out of there. But like you say, it's challenging because the audiences, they've seen it all. It's like New York. It's there every day, and it's more challenging, but still, you just feel the creativity in the air that most of the people, are creating art somehow. I don't care if they're, an actor or a writer or a filmmaker or, a musician or a producer, an engineer, or making videos or editors. You get a real sense that, you're in a space that has more creatives than otherwise.
Absolutely, especially in Los Angeles. At any given show, if you were to sort of just ask people at the shows, there a lot of times it is people in the industry, whether it's music or film or television. I think there's artists who are based in LA have a big leg up because people who are like music supervisors and working in film and television, they just love going to concerts too. So a lot of times I've seen friends of mine who get a lot of placements because they're playing the scene there, and you're in this perfect mix with the film and television world. So in a lot of ways, you can't really beat it as far as, if you especially if you want to do production and get films placed in shows and whatnot. So I think it's kind of a special and very singular kind of place.
Sure. And I know it's certainly been challenging in the last year and a half, with this
Yeah,
pandemic to tour and all that. And I know some things are opening up at the same time. You still got to be careful and have your distance, or hopefully, more people are vaccinated than not. And, it's not a super spreader event. What
right.
precautions have you taken, as you head out on the road?
Well, doing the shows with Amos Lee this last month or so, we were out in Colorado and Boulder for a few nights. We played up in Massachusetts, a few gigs up there. We were down in Louisville and Savannah. Now his shows gave me a real glimpse of how you can do this safely. First off, all the shows required vaccination or a negative test, and then in addition, they required masking. Some people comply with it more than others in the audience, but I think for the most part, people follow along with that. And then also backstage, everyone's masked up. And on Amos's shows, we would all rapid test every day before the show, before we got the sound check. So once you take all those steps, I saw firsthand that you can feel safe. Now we're trying to do that as much as I can, or as much as we can for my shows. My shows are like smaller clubs. So I know the first slate of shows in the West Coast and the Northeast all require vaccination or a negative test. As a matter of fact, I think most of those shows just require vaccination, including a Hotel Cafe in LA. And then from there, it's just, where possible, if the venue's willing to go along with it, require masking, which I hope that at this point is kind of the baseline. And then also just masking backstage. It's a different era. There's all these different little steps you have to take, but I do think it can be done safely. It's just that everyone has to be all in on creating that safe environment.
Yeah, I know it's definitely changed the meet and greets. It's one thing
Yeah.
coming out and performing the show, being backstage, but if you want to mix it up, with the attendees, and a lot of artists do have their paid meet and greets and everything.
Right.
I know a lot of them have curtailed curtailed that. It's just, even a band like Kiss, as careful as they are, they're behind plexiglass doing a meet and greet, and both lead, members get COVID.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it brings a tour to a grinding halt, and a tour that big has a lot of production and people in trucks on the road that you're paying for every day that you're not performing.
Right.
So
And
I
also
know
bigger
it's
tours,
challenging.
even the backstage scene, you have many more people, so there are many more moving parts. So if you're trying to keep everybody safe, there's more people to account for. I think that's the challenge. Yeah, and I think I mean I've seen a lot of groups just forego the meet and greet. Like we didn't do any with the Amos shows. I think for now that's generally the way to do it. There, I've seen a few situations where people just do a very organized thing. Everyone's masked. There's like distancing as people wait. So I guess there's a way to do that safely too, but probably for the foreseeable future, it's safer just forego that aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know you've had a lot of experiences, made a lot of recordings, performed a lot of shows. I don't know if it's too early to tell, but what do you feel is your next move, your next chapter? After supporting this record and doing this tour, what do you see in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because you always got to think like several steps ahead. So after this tour, kind of just focus on these next 6 weeks or so. And then after that, I've started writing some tunes that I'm pretty excited about. I think the plan will be as soon as possible, once I really pull the songs together, to hopefully go in and record maybe over the winter into the early part of next year. And then the hope would be to maybe put out a single or two and then maybe follow with more of a full on EP release. It's tough to say the timeline exactly because those things change, but perhaps summer, fall, and then kind of set the next touring cycle around that, So you always got to kind of think 6 months to a year out. Even when you're booking tours and getting holds, you got to think that way. So it helps to think of, for me at least, with my booking agents, to like just sort of think about what's the timeline. If you sort of have a year-long timeline, then that can help you kind of bracket out how you want to do the recording. So that's kind of what I'm looking at, is wrap up this tour and then pull the next set of tunes together. Try to figure out what the best approach is going to be production wise. I do kind of want to go in a different direction this time. I haven't figured it out just yet, but and then just get it rolling, get the EP out mid to later part of next year, and then hit the road again. It's just the same cycle over and over again, but it's a good cycle.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you love the EP format. A lot of times it's, of course, easier to record and get out 5 or 6 songs than a full album, and people are very song oriented, these days. So it kind of gives you a chance to change it up, after an EP. What are the benefits of the EP format for you?
Yeah, that's, I think it's just sort of the way of the world right now. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the album format. I still think there's a huge place in music for that. Probably the record that I'm still, if I really had to say on any given day, proudest of is Live in It, which is a full length. I just think when you're an independent artist, it sort of simplifies things to have an EP, because it's like you said, it's less cost, less time in the studio. Also, it's all about constant demand for content. Trying to pull a full record together, it takes more time. And I think time is kind of the essence these days. You see a lot of records now, there'll be a single, second single, third single. They'll roll that into an EP, and then it'll roll into a full record. I feel like the process of releasing music is maybe more fluid than it used to be. So the EP kind of gives you a nice in between of not just releasing standalone songs, but maybe trying to pull together a short set of songs that feel like something. They still feel like they can be of a whole without the burdens of and the time and the cost of making a full length. Now, my thought would be like if an EP really caught on, then maybe you expand that to a full length. I've seen that happen a number of times, but there's just a paradigm shift that I think people absorb music differently now. And it's more about giving people more content on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, no question about it. I cringe sometimes when somebody says they're coming out with a double album. I'm like, you should do 4 EPs, man, and just spread it
There you
out.
go.
It's like a double album. That's a lot to consume.
Yeah, and I don't know if people have it's like people's attention spans have changed. And again, that makes me sad on some level because I love a great record. But then I think of some of the great records of the 60s and late 60s and 70s, they'd be like 8, 9, 10 tracks. They weren't long albums. A lot of the best records, like I think What's Going On is like 9 songs, clocks in maybe around 35 minutes. So I even think the greatest albums had a way of being concise, kind of all killer, no filler kind of thing. I think sometimes you get the 15, 16 tracks, chances are there's some filler in there.
Well, no question about it. I think that's and when the CD came along and you could fit more songs, people got indulgent, but like you said, a lot of the classic albums, some of them are like 8, 9 songs, 30 minutes, 35 minutes,
Yeah.
and even a double album is like 60 minutes. I mean, there's a lot of people cram 60 minutes on a CD, it's really, like I say, I think quality over quantity, so.
Absolutely. I'm
Mhm.
100% with that. And just as a listener, not even just for my own records, but that's what I want as a listener. If you can deliver something special, like I'll give you another example, Prince's Dirty Mind, his third record. It's 8 songs, 30 minutes. And it's perfect to me. start to finish. It's just, it's I think like there's something about being concise and that every moment delivers that is meaningful.
Absolutely. And please let our listeners and viewers know where they can find you on social media or where they can get updates, on your tour dates or anything that's going on with you.
Yeah, for all the dates, I'd say the best site is go to mutlusounds.com. That's I gotta spell again, like you said, I'm probably the only Mutlu most people here. It's MUTLU sounds.com/tour. So you can get all the links to all the dates there. And I think there's 16 markets in all, and you can just click through the links there. Facebook is Facebook/Mutlu, and Instagram is Instagram/Mutlu Sounds, and Twitter/Mutlu Sounds. So those are probably the best places to find. But I would say if you want to direct click to the shows and the ticket pages, just go to mutlusounds.com.
Well, thank you so much. Our special guest has been MUTLU. Go out and see him live. Check out his music. A lot of great, interesting things going on. We support independent music, and he's one of the greats. So until our next conversation, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much, and best of luck on your tour dates.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, man. It was really great talking to you.